So, today I'd like to talk about emptiness and fullness. I'd like to talk about how it is that we have so much in our life that seems solid and real throughout our day, throughout our lives, throughout our careers. So many things that seem to change so slowly that they become part of the landscape. They become what we pay attention to. That's differentiation. The other side is that differentiation is nothing at all. That is the realm of equality, as we've been talking about with the winter ground and so forth. I love it that the Dharma can be described with the words wondrous, fullness, and mystery. Nothing there at all at the same time. Wondrous and fullness. That there is light and dark. There is this which I call a plum and this which I call an apple, and this which is just, what do we call it? How could we possibly describe it? That we cannot reduce this down to a formula is very, very helpful to us. That we cannot just say, oh, this is all empty, or this is all wondrous. It's not that easy to just to describe it this way. And this hand can play Chopin, can play Miles Davis, can change a baby's nappy, can chop wood, can do many things. And also, who knows the end of this hand? Who knows what this hand really is? Nothing at all. Can you really describe such a wonder as this? Can you really describe such a wonder as this afternoon, as this floor? One of the phrases that... please sit comfortably, as you wish. One of the phrases that Susan used to describe this is that emptiness holds everything, but keeps nothing. Emptiness holds everything. There's nothing that cannot be found there. But none of it lasts. None of it is permanent. There is nothing that is outside of this hand. There's nothing that can be found that we call hand that is not ultimately right here in this hand. And I'd like to explore this mystery, the mystery of the wonder and the wonder and mysterious, equal and different, through the following case. You'll see in this case 3 times where a man of knowledge and logic and of great scholarship, who had a really good handle on what his life was about, who was a scholar, a well-known scholar, and how 3 times he fell into unknowing. So this is a story about Teshan Guanjian. Teshan Guanjian. He's in a number of cases in our literature. He lived in the Tang Dynasty, 780 to 865, and he was known in his early life as a scholar, the Vinaya, of the rules and precepts of Buddhism. So he was a Buddhist, following this idea that, in order to be a good Buddhist, you needed to accumulate merit and follow this doctrine. And he was very much a scholar of the teachings of Buddha, the code of rules and precepts from Theravadan Buddhism. And he was particularly known for studying the Diamond Sutra, so much so that he was known as, his nickname was Diamond Joe. That's a cool name. And he was very invested in the system, just like many times we find, whether we consciously chose this or not, so many times we find that we are also invested in a system and a belief about who I am, what kind of person I need to be, what kind of world I live in. We have stories, belief systems, a personal narrative that we hold on to. And it's helpful, we need this, but they can take over, where we no longer see the reality of a situation if we believe in them too tightly. We have on one side this system, by the way, I don't want to disparage the idea of learning the precepts, of learning the language, of learning the scholarship behind Buddhism. Nelson Foster, one of the teachers in our tradition, was very strong with this, saying you really need to do the work of reading the literature, knowing the stories, knowing the matrix of the Dharma, read the commentaries and so forth. But always alongside of also investing in the marrow. What is no scripture? What is no Buddhism? When you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. That's one of the phrases that describes this. So Diamond Joe, we'll call him for the moment, when he heard about this Chan school in the South, he couldn't believe it. Here was a group of people saying, you don't really, this is a transmission outside the scriptures. What? This was not part of his viewpoint. He could not conceive of a sort of what he called sort of a fly by the seat of their pants type of Buddhism, talking about spontaneous awakening. And this has been a big part of the two sides of Buddhism, of Zen particularly, the slow school versus the fast school, the ones that say you can have instantaneous awakening, and the other ones that said, no, you slowly practice and so forth. This dichotomy is constantly being re-resolved, not only in the history of Buddhism, but in our own lives as well. We practice sitting hour after hour, learning to just give up all hope that, oh, will I ever pass Mu or whatever it is. And at the same time, the awakenings are all around us. It's a matter of just all of a sudden it becomes clear. So he hears about this southern school of Chan Buddhism. And I just to pause on that for a moment, thinking about some of the things that are going on in our society right now, where people are caught in bubbles and retract from anyone who does not believe in their bubble, who does not behold the same things that they believe, who retreat from friends who disagree with them, and so forth. We have this very much as a part of the sickness that is going on in our society right now, and this is a phenomenon that isn't just reserved for religion or politics, but all sorts of ways that we shut out friends on social media or don't invite people and so forth. The sense of reconciliation, of coming together, of not staying in one place and saying this place is the all in all, is an important consideration for us. And so that's why I just raise this, because one of the things that often is said about this young Teshan in the story, that he was full of arrogance and pride, that he was going to come down and teach these Chan school people the way of the Diamond Sutra. And in a lot of the commentaries, he's described that way as very arrogant. But I like what he's doing. He doesn't believe in something, and so he's flying down to confront it. He's calling what he sees as a spade, and saying that, this is something that needs to be confronted. So oftentimes, as I'm saying, we just let it pass, or we just disinvite people. And so yeah, we can look at Deshan's trip down south to visit the Chan school as a very heroic path that he's taken. And on the way, he meets his first bit of darkness. On the way, he met an old woman, often showing up in Zen stories, who are far more attained than a lot of the men around them, but they are not included as potential Zen masters themselves, because obviously they're women, right? Of that time. He meets this old woman selling basically fast food on the side of the road, selling dumplings, it's said. And there is a test here. Does he arrogantly dismiss her, or does he listen to what she has to say? And here he is, a younger man, burning with knowledge, burning with a sense of self-righteousness. And to listen to how she engages him is a lesson in great teaching. Not only so he asks her for a dumpling. He asks for sometimes it's put as refreshment, and he's obviously carrying this big, huge crate full of books on his back, and so she challenges her. Says, "So tell me, what do you got there?" And eyeing his books. And he says, "Oh, these are notes and commentaries on the Diamond Sutra," he says. And notice how she not only knows about the Diamond Sutra, but she's willing to give up her own livelihood in order to step into a challenge with him for his benefit. She says, "I'll ask you a question. If you can answer this question, your dumplings are free. If you can't, no dumplings for you." And so it's entirely for his benefit what she's doing here. She doesn't get paid either way. So she quotes the same sutra to him. She says, in the Diamond Sutra it says, past mind cannot be attained. Present mind cannot be attained. Future mind cannot be attained. Which mind are you revealing right now? Or sometimes, which mind are you grasping right now? He was speechless. This is his first moment of darkness. How could he possibly answer such a question? And so, being a woman, he didn't say, "Oh, this is a great Zen master who's challenged me with this great skillfulness." He says, "Oh, do you know of a Zen master around here?" So she says, "Yes, you can go down to Long Tan's temple about 5 miles down the way." And pointed him his way, and off he goes, and he didn't get his dumplings. So now we're coming up to the second encounter with darkness he's going to meet. And he comes into Long Tan, was a famous Zen or Chan master of his time. His name, Long Tan, means dragon marsh. So that comes up, and he comes up to the temple and goes marching right into the Dharma hall. And marches right up to Long Tan, the teacher, and says, "Long have I heard of Long Tan, dragon marsh, but I've seen no marsh, and I've seen no dragons." So he's challenging him here, you know? "Who are you? I don't see anything much. You don't look like much." And often Zen masters don't look like much. It's a bit of a, like, you can see him, boom, yeah, mic drop. I don't see any dragon around here. So listen to how Long Tan takes this. This is the big switcheroo here. He joins in. He says, agreeing. "Now you have seen Dragon Marsh. You have seen it completely and personally." What is he saying? Yes, you have seen dragon. If you see no dragon and you say no marsh, you have seen Dragon Marsh. Was he saying, yeah, there's nothing much here? What was he saying? Well, he didn't have a reply for this. Again, he's brought into speechlessness. He has nothing to reply. But he remained, and he just stuck around for the rest of the day. And that evening, he was granted access to meet with the teacher, which he eagerly went to meet with the teacher. And but just that moment is interesting. In case 13 of the Mumonkan, we have another case with Teshan, but Teshan in this story is now an old man. He's gone through his journey. He's become abbot of the temple, and he comes down to lunch, and he's carrying his bowls in hand to go have lunch. And when he gets to the bottom of the stairs, the cook says, "What are you doing here? I haven't rung the bell. There's no lunch here." And so Teshan just simply turns around and walks away. Again, no defense, no argument or anything like that. And he was, and everybody's like, "Oh, he's getting old and doddery," but he just completely moves with it and no defense. In the same way that Long Tan greets him right here. So it's interesting to see what's happened with him between his early righteousness and arrogance toward Long Tan, and then when he's greeted with sort of abuse by others, and how he is completely assimilated it into who he is. So Teshan that night here's the third darkness. Teshan visited Longtan and questioned him very sincerely into the night. He had something he was really pressing to understand here. What is he seeking? Our relationship to what we have believed and what we have taken on and said, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, can be very tightly held. But now the bottom has dropped out of his belief system, of his self-narrative that he's been holding so strongly. So he wants to understand something here. And he questions him, it says, on into the night. It grew late, and Longtan said to him, the elder teacher says to him, listen, it's late. Maybe it's time to retire. And Teshan stood up, made his bows, and then lifted the blinds, opened the door to go outside. But he was met by darkness. He'd been questioning so long that he hadn't realized it had gone deep dark into the night. And here's this dark. And turning back, he says, it's dark outside. And indeed it is. It's time perhaps for, there's something ripe in him at this moment. So Longtan lit a paper candle, not a paper candle, but a lantern, with a paper lantern with a candle inside it, lit the candle and handed it to him. And just as he was about to take it, Longtan blew it out and completely swallowed in darkness. A barest of gestures, just shorter than the word moo, just blowing out the candle. This is a moment upon which this whole story turns. And at that moment, Teshan had a great realization. What did he realize? It's dark out here. Candle, lantern. Take away the light. What does he realize? Plunged into darkness in this moment. Don't try to parse this or make any symbolic gesture out of this. I mean, that is an easy thing to start doing. We have the dark and the light and so forth. Stay with the essential matter of that moment, just itself. The rawness of that. And what it is to be suddenly, surprisingly, plunged into darkness. This happens to us a lot in our lives. We think we know what we're doing. We have this sense of a trajectory of things. And in an instant, what we knew up until now means nothing. Anything that we thought we could hold as a guard against the unknown disappears. It can be literal darkness. It can be relationships. It can be career. It can be just all of a sudden what we formerly believed we realize doesn't carry any water. This happens all the time. And this is one of the great calls that seems to run throughout human cultures, that we are going to have these times when the beliefs that have held us together until a certain point no longer hold. A lot of people are going through this right now in our society. We thought we knew what it was all about. We believed in a certain style of world, and all of a sudden realize those rules don't apply anymore. It might not be that we have another 200 years, 2,000 years of stable environment to hold on to. We might have that yanked away. We might not have, the shorelines. We might not have the governments that we used to have. And at such a time, there's an old Irish story this says, when the beliefs that no longer hold a group of people together, it's everyone's job to go out into the darkness, to go out into the edge of what has been known before, to go out into the metaphorical woods beyond where the civilization has been up until that moment, and to find something that's true for themselves, something that you can hold and know to be true, and bring it back to society, bring it back to the village, and weave it together to remake the belief at the beginning, at the center of who we are. And it's got to be something that's stronger than held before, not in terms of being more authoritative necessarily, but something in our times that can understand that we flex, we ebb and flow. There is the known and the unknown. We have had many 10,000 years of being a society built on power, on authority, on being someone who can get things for themselves. But we're finding that doesn't work. We need a mind 2.0 in many ways that is about connecting, that is about how we find our way together, how we see into complexity rather than simple by duality of right and wrong and so forth. So this is the darkness that we often face. It has a lot to do, there's a number of words for being plunged into, for enlightenment, for all of a sudden waking up in a certain way. Waking up, there's realization, there's, kensho, nirvana. I really like the word intimacy, which is often used. And the intimacy of the darkness is a very different kind of intimacy than we have in the light. As I said last night, it's about feeling our way in, moment by moment, without knowing clearly what we're doing, without looking for perfection, but looking at what really is in that darkness, and finding our way with all of our senses on alert. So, darkness. What is darkness? Zazen is darkness. We sit here and we don't react. We may have many conjectures. I bet a lot of you have made a lot of really cool patterns on the floor in your minds. Oh, I see a face, on the wall, in front of you. Like, oh yeah, I can see the map of Ireland. Or so but again and again, we are plunged into this darkness of Zazen to stop our regular activities, to occupy the space, which is both light and dark, but not reacting to either. As I said earlier, too, this is a time of fasting of our regular ways of doing things. A fasting from quick reactions, a fasting from distractions, from our phones, from our books, from reading the paper, and so forth. We tend to, with the speed that we usually normally live our lives, we tend to skip over a lot of the things that we start to experience when we are just sitting in Zazen. And that's why oftentimes emotions can come up, either good or bad. Feelings of great bliss and of joy, also feelings of sadness or despair, because we usually don't take the time to allow them to come out. The metaphor is of, going out into the woods. If you're crashing about and making a lot of noise and looking about with you, you're not going to see very much. But if you go quietly and sit down and wait there and just wait, that's when the birds start to come out, and maybe kangaroos or whatever, wallabies. What is there starts to emerge when we're quiet and wait. Zazen is an interesting one to look at in terms of differentiation and equality as well. The wondrous and the mysterious as well. We have to hold ourselves in neither pole, but not just in the center as either. There's in terms of sitting Zazen, we have to hold our bodies loose, but yet full of energy. There's a sense of upright and relaxed at the same time. One of the descriptions is practicing. This doesn't really work for me. Maybe you. Practicing like your hair is on fire. Or practicing like your hair is on fire, and yet at the same time undisturbed, accepting the struggle just as it is. One particular favorite description of Zazen I read once was it's like walking a tightrope through a crowd that's situated in a crowded marketplace with a large open-brimmed bowl of water is filled to the brim with water, and followed by a swordsman who's ready to cut you down if you stop. But absolutely loose throughout that process. If you start to rigidify or at all, or get fearful, all of a sudden the muscles are tight and they don't work and you lose your balance. So we can't simply find the middle ground with this and have that as a concept. But we must be at all extremes of this and yet at none at all. It's a very counterintuitive thing to describe, but I like that physicists have a very similar way of talking about some of the great equations that they've developed, where, for instance, light is a particle, light is a wave, opposites, and yet both true. When you find something that's very close to what reality is, the paradoxes and the opposites start to fall away as being divided against each other. And so it is with Zazen. We're sitting here and we're balancing on the tightrope, moving through the marketplace with a bowl full of water and a swordsman waiting to cut us down if we stop. I like it that so many friends of mine say, oh, I really wish I could sit Zazen. That sounds really great, but I get bored and fidgety. So do I. Anybody here? Can I get an amen on that? Yeah. So we are choosing here to live with our experience as it is, just as it is. And there's a Sufi story, about a man who fell upon hard times. He lost his wealth, he lost his home, and he was living out on the streets. And an old friend of his from happier times saw him there and says, "Come with me. Let's go have something to drink. We're gonna have some food." And they went and had a great night of carousing. And he fell asleep, just intoxicated, and fell asleep. And his friend got up before him, so he left him. But before he left, he took this very precious jewel and sewed it into the hem of his cloak, so that when he woke up, he would have something, so he wouldn't have to live out in the streets, and he would be, quite wealthy with his jewel. His friend, though, saw him a few months later, and he was still very poor. He says, "What happened?" He says, "What do you mean, what happened?" He says, "But I gave you that jewel." He says, "What?" And he points out this jewel. He hadn't known that all along this time he had what he needed right there above his heart. That's a great metaphor for a lot of what we do when we come to Zazen, recognizing that there is something that has always been there for us. It's not that we're trying to add anything to our lives. We're not trying to accomplish anything so much as realize who we really are and this wealth that has always been there for us. There's an element of recognition that we don't know necessarily what we are seeking as we sit here. Some of the earliest Buddhist literature there is were some songs from nuns who were direct disciples of the Buddha. There's songs from the men, and that's called Therigatha. But the Therigatha are the earliest known Buddhist literature, and these are songs or short verses from Buddhist nuns. One of them is from a nun named Dhammadina, and this is talking about this idea that we don't necessarily know what we're seeking until we find it. She wrote, "For so long, I thought only of the river's end, of realization, of passing through to nirvana. For so long, I only thought of the river's end. Then one morning, I set my paddle down to watch the sunrise over the eastern hills, only to find myself floating somehow gently upstream. I promise, it's not what I expected." What? I'll read that again because I love the imagery of the eastern hills, and to find myself floating somewhat gently upstream, which is a metaphor in the story of the Buddha as well. He put his bowl, he says, if I'm going to achieve anything, things are going to have to change. And he put his bowl into the water, and it floated upstream as well. For so long, I thought only of the river's end. Then one morning, I set my paddle down to watch the sunrise over the eastern hills, only to find myself floating somehow gently upstream. I promise, it's not what I expected. And that's only possible when we let go of our knowledge, when we let go of our sense of what the world is all about, when we let go of what we expect to find. I have an idea of what enlightenment is going to be like. It's going to be great. Let it go. Let it go. And the true richness appears.
Excuse me, do you want to stand up? I'll put a chair.
Oh, please, yeah. You got a cramp?
Yes.
Oh, dear. Do you want, maybe someone can get you a glass of water?
No, it's okay. I just need to straighten.
Oh, okay. Right.
Sorry.
Oh, no. We have, I don't want my friends to let me down. I don't want my children to ever suffer. I don't want I want to finally get on top of all the loose ends in my life. I want to lose that weight. I want to gain that weight. I want to, whatever, not grow old. That would be a nice one too. But we have to let go of all of those things in order to see what's underneath that goes on throughout the night when we're asleep. That does not come and go. We're only aware of that when we let go of the bright and become intimate too with the darkness. Just coming back to the theme we talked about earlier around winter. Winter is a time of blanketing over some of these differences and of these opinions. And it's not that we don't want to have opinions, but when they're informed by only our self-centered opinions about what is good and bad, they're going to bring suffering. When we have a map of reality that never matches reality, and it never will if we think we're going to get ahead of it. If we think that we can hold on to those things that we really like and push away those things that we don't like, our map is always going to be dissatisfactory. We're going to have to accept that we have winter as well as summer. In summer, we have brightness and greenness and produce and everything like that. In winter, things fall away. And that saying I mentioned before of emptiness holds everything but keeps nothing, that is a part that keeps nothing. And so we have to, do we want to say there should never be a winter in our life? We're not here to find freedom from troubles. We're not here to find freedoms from our troubles, but we're here to find freedom in the midst of our troubles. That's a very important distinction about what we do with Zazen, with Zen. I seem to love saying that because I always find myself coming back to that. Inhale and exhale. Fist and open fingers. Summer and winter. An endless cycle. Waves and particles. We are finite. We are going to die. And also, we are timeless and universal storytellers of a great truth. So the darkness. Both Yasutani Roshi and Sakita Roshi spoke about 5 progressive types of darkness, or blindness that they call them, which they talk about that every Zen student goes through, well, at least to some degree. The first one is blindness of the ordinary unenlightened person. So such a person has no eye, has no sense of the Dharma, has even maybe not even a sense consciously that there might be something wrong. Sakita called this the blindness of the general run of ignorant people. A bit rough, but here you go. But it is true that we often go through unnecessary suffering when we're trapped in a story, but we don't know where you're trapped necessarily. But it is clear once we start to get some distance from it we can see how we have been trapped all along, and how how ourselves and others constantly fall into this cycle of holding on and getting trapped. We make a projection about the world, and then we react to that projection because it's not right. We don't want to accept reality the way that it is, so we say, I'm going to escape from that by exercising every day, and I'll never die. And how come my plan isn't working? I'm 70 and it's not as good as it used to be, or whatever. We create a patina of immortality or immovability, and it just doesn't work, and so we get angry with that. The second blindness, so that's the first level of blindness. The second is obstruction blindness, which includes all deluded thoughts, philosophies, and distinctions, and they prevent us from seeing as they really are. I'm just reading from what Yasutani wrote about it. It is not simply a matter of lacking an enlightened eye. We are prevented from seeing clearly by all the collected philosophy and thoughts accumulated in our heads. So that's another way of saying that they just don't believe in Buddhism. The evil blindness of the heretics, Sakita called it. We can look at this sort of as a plug for the home team, come on, go Buddhism, But I think he's saying something more than that, that kind of propaganda doth butter no parsnips, as I say. But there can be a sort of willful ignorance. I'm not going to... we can see so many times where the world is filled with instances where we just do not want to recognize right before our eyes. It's too painful. I think it was Yeats. Might not have been Yeats. Let's say it's Yeats for right now. He wrote, "The most impossible task is to convince a person of a truth which will cost them money or effort." And so sometimes we just don't want to believe that there's something we can do further about who we are in the world. And it's a very helpful type of blindness. These are called the 5 blindnesses, but as you'll see, they're actually moving through stages of greater and greater benefit as we get blinder, ironically. Someone who doubts the common truths of their day, who doubts the common philosophy of the day, is going to be more willing to maybe look up what really works. So we don't want to just discount this out of hand. The third type of blindness, still blind, the blindness of the person who has yet to see the truth, although he or she is devoting themselves wholeheartedly to Zen practice. This is the true blindness of the enlightened student. The worldly eye of such a person has become blind. So this is the blindness of emptiness. A person has peered in and seen all of a sudden into their true reality. Just a glimpse. But they make a thing out of nothingness. They hold on to this. This is called the cave of the devils oftentimes in Buddhism. So this is the third type of blindness. The fourth is called authentic blindness. When we encounter the essential world, we can see nothing because there is nothing to see. The blindness of those who stick to the realization and make much of being enlightened, attaching to emptiness. And then the fifth, which he calls, or they call, true blindness, true darkness. At this point, even the eye of Satori is blind. We have completely forgotten such unnatural matters as Satori and be completely ordinary. We see this in the 10th ox herding picture. Perhaps you're familiar with these. The stages of practice, starting off with a young, I'm going to slip into the sexist language that it was originally written in, but I'll try and correct myself. A young person originally, looking for the ox, the great way, the great dharma. They're looking for the ox. They find the ox. They learn to ride the ox. They eventually lead the ox and the person ride effortlessly. And then there is no ox. And then there's just a beautiful enso of oneness. But that's the 9th picture. The great realization isn't the end of it. The 10th picture is an old man, fat and bald, wearing loose clothes, carrying a sack over his shoulders, going into the marketplace with dusty feet, and no thought of Buddhism, no thought of enlightenment, no thought of realization. That's what we're talking about here with the 5th one as of authentic blindness. no thought, Buddhism, schmoodism. Who needs it? Let's have some fun, whatever. So, where even the eye of Satori is blind. This is the best form of blindness. This is the eye of the Buddhas of the three worlds. The Buddha has passed through the other stages of blindness to eventually reach the state of true blindness, the transcendent or genuine blindness. So, I'd just like to finish, I think, because we've been going for quite a while. I'd like to finish with a couple of images. One from Uncle Max, who some of you may have heard of in some of Susan's talks. Some of you wouldn't have. Uncle Max is an Aboriginal elder of the southwest coast of New South Wales, and fully steeped in the tradition of his culture, and having gone through the initiations to be truly one of the elders of his people. And he's a great font of wisdom for many people. And in Susan's book, Zen Upside Down, she quotes him a lot as a teacher of an Aboriginal wisdom from here, native to Australia, and looks at how many ways the Aboriginal wisdom and the Zen wisdom have so much in common. But in this one story, he was out with a group of people who were talking about reconciliation, how, Native and Indigenous rights, how they could look at the legal system and the societal system to make reconciliation more of a reality between traditional Australia and the Aboriginal way of life. And at one point, they were walking through, talking outside, and at one point, Uncle Max said something that shocked everybody around him. Is, I don't hold with this talk of reconciliation. He continued, how can you have reconciliation where there's never been a relationship in the first place? He knelt and cupped a handful of dirt from the ground. I just tell both mobs, reconcile with this, and you won't need any reconciliation after that. This story grows on me every single time I hear it. In fact, in some ways, I don't think there's any teaching greater than this. The reconcile with this. He's not talking about soil, of course. He's talking about the ground of our understanding, underneath our arguments and of our agendas, the earth, very old and very wet, cold and wet for us right now. Reconcile with this. Is there something that is not contained in this? This for us. And this is what it is to touch into the deep unknowing of winter, of our lives, and their most essential elements of what is often seen when we look at it. It seems like nothing's really happening. But underneath there's a great wisdom that comes from intimacy and recognition of the truth that does not come and go, that is unborn and undying. So I won't finish this story because basically at that point, Teshan has had his I might pick up some of this tomorrow, but Teshan has had his realization and goes on to become an abbot. And they lived happily ever after. But I will just finish with a poem. This is from Hafiz. It's called Someone Should Start Laughing. And it takes up this theme of living with the unknown that we might not even know is there. I have 1,000 brilliant lies for the question, how are you? I have 1,000 brilliant lies for the question, what is God? If you think that the truth can be known from words, if you think that the sun and the ocean can pass through that tiny opening called the mouth, oh, someone should start laughing. Someone should start wildly laughing now. Thank you.